I thought it was time to share my story. Start to finish. I'm going to try and keep this short, obviously. But the process that I went through to find this path, to map out the cosmos, OPL Quantum Healing, and the ascension process up into activation of the diamond sun and even the rainbow body, which I haven't activated yet, so I can't give you details on that, but I can show you essentially what drove me through this, why I have the perspective I have, and how I got to this point. Okay, I feel like it's important for people to understand that process. I did channel, but my channelings were through remembrance as well as an encouragement to embody. It wasn't a psychic experience, it was an embodiment experience, which is why my work's quite a bit different, okay? And the reason is because I had a really deep trauma when I was a child that I had to clear literally everything in my field before I could find and heal. And until that was healed, everything else was pretty much blocked. So I'm going to go through this in a fairly succinct way and hopefully get to all the main points, okay? So before I incarnated here, I had a past life. I actually had 3 past lives as part of the Diamond Soul. I incarnated as the Diamond Soul. So I was essentially a Buddhist monk, more refined than that, but and I meditated and healed. What I did in those lifetimes was go back through all of my lifetimes, remember, clear, awaken everything, heal all my past lives. I did multidimensional travel and traveled into the future, into the past to heal, align, and essentially set up my life for this lifetime. Okay, the timelines and the trajectory and the destiny, it was predetermined, very much of it was, okay? And then I had a deviation from the plan. Essentially, it was supposed to be a pretty simple path. I was meant to come in, do my work, set up the Jedi school, do my healing work, set up systems to help people move through the healing process, remembering process, ascension, evolution into unity, pretty simply, and to set up structures for the planetary collective that were sustainable, easy to follow, understand, and we could establish a strong foundation for humanity that would keep us aligned with source, so we wouldn't fall back into the inversion or distortions. Okay, that was the plan when I came in. So that's the Jedi School. That's what it does. It's a system to help people move through the healing process, alignment, activation, so they can step into full unity with source, and then go out and start building systems and structures for civilization moving forward, okay? There was a deviation from the plan, and essentially I had made an agreement with someone that owed karma from a past life, and I said I would help them pay back karma because I had cleared everything. I was coming back here to build the school. I didn't have anything to clear, nothing to do. It was essentially just to do that. So I was like, sure, of course I can help you with that. And they decided they didn't want to fulfill that role. Okay, we always have free will. We can follow our destiny and the highest path, or we cannot. And that's part of the risk of coming here. So they ignored the agreement and started recreating old patterns. And what happened is this cloaked my path. What they did cloaked my path in struggle instead of the joy and beauty and bliss of the teaching path that I should have had. It ended up being a path of clearing darkness, going into the depths to find this and heal it because of the distortion that happened. Okay, so I had an early trauma. It was between the years of birth to about 2 years, maybe a little bit older, and it was a really intense trauma. I didn't find it until actually recently. Okay, and what happened there is my soul was dislodged from my body and my root was fractured. My nervous system went through massive trauma, and I carried that trauma through my entire life. Okay, so it set the stage for everything I experienced, that early childhood trauma that distorted and fragmented the root. I wasn't able to create, to manifest. I had issues with health, with abundance, with self-worth, finding home. I never felt at home anywhere, not with anyone. I was always moving, traveling, had a hard time finding roots, who I was. My soul was out of my body. I eventually was able to reground my soul into my body when I moved into the sixth density, which I teach in the school how to do that. It took me about 2 years. It was that dense and that hard to actually reground. Okay. And so though that trauma and the following issues I had throughout my life were the driving factor. Instead of it being a light-based path where I knew where I was going, what I was doing, etc., it turned into a deep dive into darkness so that I could find this. And the interesting thing about it is that I stayed on path. It was a lot harder than it should have been, but it was like destiny. I knew where I was going. It just, the path to get there was a lot harder, a lot more complex. It doesn't have to be that hard. Okay. So I was always redirected. If I started going off path, I would be redirected. Okay. And that's something you should know about destiny. As long as your heart is aligned and you stay pure there, you will always find your way. You will always be redirected. Okay. So that is a truth there. Okay. I'm not going into what that was, but it essentially fractured the foundations of my life. And so that's what I struggled with, was foundations, health, abundance, my place in the world, etc. So growing up in my teen years, I was a gymnast, and I had nervous system issues, fight or flight. I had a lot of anger issues. Actually came down with type 1 diabetes when I was 11, and that was because I was a hypersensitive child. My kundalini was already open, my third eye was open, nervous system was already expanded, and so the trauma was compounded because of that, and the body actually started attacking itself instead of the nervous system, instead of just being in that peaceful state, which is what I had planned for. And then I was a gymnast. I fractured my back in 4 places. I was told I needed a rod in my back. I need full surgery. I'd be in a wheelchair and a full body cast for a year in high school. And I said no, I wasn't going to do it. I did acupuncture instead. And that was kind of the first opening into the healing modalities. Okay. So those early diabetes and the fractures were what essentially opened the door for me to step back into my path. Okay. And they were the driving factors. Okay. The fracturing of the foundation, type 1 diabetes, and the healing, finding my way back to health that way. Okay. And then college, I was in college for about 10 years. I studied everything under the sun. I just couldn't find my place there. I studied landscape architecture, fine art, fashion, graphic design, theater, English. And I learned a lot through that process, and that's part of why I'm so comprehensive in what I'm doing now. Okay. But what I realized also after I stopped going to college, and this started when I was in college because I was in college for so long, as I started creating, I started painting. I was a turntablist and a fashion designer. And I went through this phase where I could not stop creating. Like I had to create art and paint or make music. It was something that I needed. And the creative process is one of the most foundational and powerful healing modalities you can do, because it actually heals your brain. So if you go through abuse or trauma as a child, creativity can help heal that and reconnect to your soul. Okay. So that was the second phase. The creativity was the push there. Then I had a spiritual awakening and began studying the science of spirituality. My mom died in around 2009, and I had an awakening after she passed and realized the true nature of reality. And I started following that path and studying science of spirituality, looking to the other side to connect to her, and realizing that I actually channeled when I wrote. I had a huge team of spirit guides and angels around me all the time. And that's what triggered that awakening into that. Okay. I moved to Brooklyn. I studied Reiki, got my master Reiki teacher's license. I studied sound healing. I did a year-long apprenticeship with a shaman. I started doing hands-on healing work. And then I moved to California. I started doing quantum healing. And so I was doing remote healing. And it was when I was in California that I started downloading the OPL Quantum Healing modality, which is sacred geometry, sound, and crystals. And you do it non-locally. And what was driving this healing is I started doing the violet flame. So if you are new to healing, the best thing you could do, if you just want to clear your field, keep your field pure, and slowly progress as is organic and natural. Just do violet flame meditation every day. That's all you need to do. It won't go into the deep stuff. It's not going to clear out the hidden things, but it will keep your field clear. Okay, so this healing modality, I wanted to clear everything out of my field because I knew there was a path and a mission that I needed to do. I was shown this by Archangel Metatron, and I started doing this, and it was really effective. And so what I started to do was watching my own transformation through this and my client's transformation through this. And there was still stuff going on. I was still blocked. I was still having foundational issues in my life. And so I taught myself how to read the field, how to measure the chakras. I knew there were blocks there. I knew there were distortions. I knew there was something there I needed to find. And so I came up with this analytical way to measure the field instead of just intuitive, because when I was dislodged from my body, not only was my foundation blocked, but my connection to spirit was completely disconnected. And I was taught to not trust that. So I had to come up with a holistic way to look at my field and to heal. And that was through this analysis process. So I started doing the analysis process for myself to heal. And the OPL Quantum Healing till I started recording those so that I could do the sessions, lay down and receive a session, which those are in the prep school. That's what the prep school is about, is healing and working on building your intuition, your consciousness, and mastering your energy field. Okay, that's what I help people do through the school. That was always the path. My approach to it in this life was to find this one thing that happened when I was a child, not knowing that it was there. Okay, I didn't know about this until recently. Okay, so as I was doing the healing sessions and the light body work, I started realizing that the work pushes people into higher frequencies really quickly. And what I noticed was the transformation, and it was ascension. So people were moving through ascension, regrounding, moving into the upgraded chakra systems, moving up the densities, okay? Clearing, expanding, okay? And I just kept documenting this. And because I was still having those foundational issues, I was rooted in my body, my chakras were open, aligned, my energy field was clear, but I was still struggling. So I just kept going and going and going and going. So I realized through this, I was remembering my past lives where I'd set this up, remember this healing modality, remember this process so you can teach it and help establish great foundations for humanity to step into this alignment so we can have a sustainable collective. Okay. So we started raising the frequency, moving through this, and I eventually went into, essentially I thought I had done all my healing. So I was just sitting around waiting. I didn't know what was going on. And there was still more to do. So that's about 8D. So the Aura of God, the book I wrote, that stops about 8D. That's space time. So within space, it goes up to 8D. There's more. So as you keep expanding, so for instance, your point is to merge duality. You can merge a tiny bit of duality, light and dark, if you want. Or you can go higher, light and dark. Or diamond sun, light and dark. Okay, this merges the deepest duality that there is. You have to go really, really deep into your subconscious mind to activate the diamond sun. So once I realized there was more, I actually ended up going into the cave experience. And the cave pressurized my field and started pushing every micro distortion out of my field. So they weren't huge blocks, rips or tears. There was no wobbles or closed chakras, nothing like that. It was more of threads of energy, subconscious energy. There was curse energy in there from the Atlantean curse. There was ancestral energy, ancestral patterns there. All of this stuff started having to get pushed out of the physical body and the field for the field to continue expanding. So I went deep into that and ended up activating the diamond sun body. And so a normal person's frequency is 250 hertz. The first time I measured mine was 200,000 hertz, which is actually pretty high. Most people are around there now. If you're on the ascension path, you're aligned with source. That's probably an average. But the diamond sun body activates around 250 million hertz. Okay, and it keeps expanding, but it will stagnate if everything is not cleared. It basically will force you to clear everything in your field, all the distortions. You have to have really good boundaries, centered, healed, peaceful, and it doesn't come through force. It comes through your field. It becomes a living presence within your life, okay? So that was activated, and I felt there was still more there. So I had to keep pushing. And I could tell there was something I had compartmentalized. There was like waves of energy in my field. And I just kept digging until I found this compartment. And that was the trauma from when I was a baby. So I dug and dug and dug and dug until I found it. I finally found this compartment, and it wasn't in my field. It wasn't a distortion. It wasn't a thread. It wasn't part of the inversion or ice energy. It was deeply, deeply buried in my subconscious mind, so far removed from my consciousness that it took me getting all the way to here to be able to find it, because there was nothing left in my field but that. And so I found it, I opened it, and then I pulled out everything that was within it. And I purged this deep, deep held sadness of what the trauma was when I was a baby. And I allowed that to flow out. And I realized as I tapped into that feeling, I had opened that compartment about 10 years ago. The same thing happened. And I started sobbing for weeks everywhere. And it was the first purge 10 years ago. And it took me till now to find the strength to actually reopen it and look at what was in it, because before I didn't. Before it was just the purge. And I thought that was it, and I just left it. But it was still there, and I kept getting the message. You have to heal your heart. You have to heal your heart. And so that's why I kept digging. And so that was the final purge. And it took me a while to fully resolve that within myself. But it was the final clearing. And it was facing that last distortion directly, allowed for complete full soul return, spiritual essence, the essence returning, and the healing complete. So this was the divine union, remerging. Divine union, fully merged. So the reason why I'm telling this to you guys is so that you understand the process of healing. Yes, it should be joyful. The other thing I wanted to say too is through this process, I started studying the thoughts become things and manifestation and law of attraction. And through that process, I ignored everything. I pretended everything was great. I tried to find that inner peace, and I, did my meditations and stuff. But until the deepest stuff is cleared, all you're doing is pushing those things further into the subconscious mind, okay? So when you do the healing and ascension path properly through the systems, that I've created. You don't have to use my system, but I did this to make people's lives easier. It shouldn't be this hard, okay? If you go through and you align and you heal and you evolve and you heal and you evolve and you stay in that alignment with source, following your highest path, that is how true healing happens. And that's how true elevation happens, okay? It's not about creating peace through force, because your field is very expansive. Your mind and your subconscious mind is very powerful, okay? Those things have to be cleared to be able to crystallize the field, okay? So the path isn't meant to be hard. My struggles through this helped me to not only learn the ins and outs and depths of all of this, but to see the light and the darkness, and to bring it into a cohesive system to help people align and harmonize, okay? So the full circle was that I came in healed, but there was one thing happened almost 50 years ago that affected my entire life. That's why we have to do the healing. And I was able to stay on path and not get completely thrown off path or lose my mission. And that's what I want to help people do, is to get on their mission, get on their path, and move through the healing journey and ascension journey with more grace and ease, with a foundational platform to move through. And that's also why I'm doing the light body attunement messages as well, because these will help you stay attuned. And if you need more help than that, join the school, do session work, etc. Okay, so it's a pretty interesting path that I went through, and I hope that people can find it inspiring, that it wasn't easy, but I made it through, and I'm here to help people with that process, okay, and stepping into your greatest potential and greatest power. Okay, sending so much love.